In this DOM and web category section, we are discussing mouse event object. There will be 4 relative questions to this topic. Now we are focusing on various mouse related events. We have already seen a click event in the previous section. Let's try few of the events practically. First we will see click, right click and the double click event. At the moment I have created one division and just a function. The division has an ID that is div e and I have taken the reference and I am assigning the message to this division. Let me also show you the output quickly. This is how it looks. Now I am going to configure the click, double click and the right click event. To write it in a more clear way, I am going to write each event on a next line. So this closing of division, I am going to bring it on new line. Here I am going to say on click and the function I am calling is the eHandler function, that is event handler. So I write eHandler here and I am going to pass a message that click. The message which is passed to this function, that I will write here. At the moment, let's say I remove this. I don't need a message here. So whenever an event is clicked, there is a specific string I am passing to this message and this message is assigned to the division. Let's configure rest of the events. I will say on context menu. Now this is an event which is executed when the user presses the right mouse button. So here also I'm going to call the event handler function and here I will pass right click and the next event is on double click. Again I'm going to say event handler and here I'll pass double click. So every time when an event is fired, we are passing the respective string and that we are displaying in the division. Let's try with these 3 events first. I'm saving this. Now let's go to the browser. I'll just refresh the changes. Now if I click here, you see that the click event is fired. When I right click, as you can see that the right click message is displayed and also the context menu items are also displayed. And if I double click here, then it displays double click. So on context menu item is also one of the event which you can use to handle the right click. Imagine that you want to disable the right click on this particular element, that is on this division. You don't want to have the right click. What you can do, you can simply return false. I'll say return false. So this will cancel the event. In fact, this can happen to any event. Let's say you want to cancel the mouse down event or maybe mouse up event. Then you can just say return false. So that relative event is not executed. So now, for example, I right click, then I do not see the context menu or the event is not executed at all. If you click, you have this event here and double click also has the event. So these are the click events. Now let's try the mouse down and mouse up event as well. So here instead of on click, I'll say on mouse down and here I'll say on mouse up. Now I'm going to change the messages. I'll just leave this as it is. And this last event, let's say I do not want it. So I'm going to remove that. Here I'll say mouse down and here mouse up. Let's go to the browser. Refresh. Now I'm holding down the mouse key. You see, it says mouse down. The moment I release it, it says mouse up. So you have 2 more events like this, mouse up and mouse down. Apart from this mouse up and down, there are various events on mouse movement as well. I'm just going to discuss 2 events, that is mouse out and mouse over. There are also mouse enter, mouse leave and various events you see related to mouse, but they are easy to understand. So let me just discuss 2 events here. I will say mouse out and here mouse over. On mouse over I'm going to call this. So this function is called when you roll over on this division. So let me just save this and go back to the output. I'll refresh. You see now mouse over is constantly getting executed, right? The moment I move the mouse out of the region, it says mouse out. So you can handle the mouse move events as well. With the event object, we have various properties. Few of the properties we have discussed in previous section as well. So now we are discussing one more useful property, that is event.button. And for that, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to pass any string here. Instead, I'll declare this MSG, that is the variable. And instead of on mouse out, let me just have only one event, that is on mouse up. And I'm going to call the event handler, but without any parameters. We don't need any other events. So I'll remove this. Now when the mouse button is released, then the event handler is fired. Here I'm going to put a condition that if event dot button, if the button is, let's say the value is 0, that means the left mouse button is pressed. So I can say message is equal to left button pressed. Similarly, I can put more conditions. I can say else if event dot button is equal to 1, that means the middle button, the wheel button is pressed. So I can say message is equal to middle button pressed. And if the value is, the value of button property is 2, that means right click is pressed. So I'll say right clicked or right button. That's it. So now we will check the output. I'll just refresh. Mouse up will update the data. So here you see that left button is pressed. If I just hold down the right click and release it, you can see that it says right button is pressed. So the button property is very useful when you want to check that which button was pressed. Apart from the button press, there are also various key values available. For example, you want to check whether any special key was pressed while a specific mouse event was executed. That is, special keys like Alt, Control, Shift, etc. So let's try that as well. So with event, we do also have Alt key which will return true. So I can write like this. I can say if event dot Alt key, if this was true. So I can write like this, or I can simply say Alt key. That means it is, by default it is true. So this will check if it is true. Then let's say in message, I want to display the key pressed was Alt key, or I want that if the key was, let's say Control key, that means CTRL key. If that was true, then the message will be Control key was pressed. Similarly, you can check for Shift key also. Let me just quickly copy this thing, and here I'm going to say Shift. If Shift key was pressed, then I'll say Shift. Now when the mouse up is executed, it will also check whether there was any key pressed or not, right? Let's say here by default I say no key. Let's refresh. Now when mouse up is fired, there is no key pressed. Now I'm holding down the Control key and I'm releasing the mouse. So you can see that the CTRL is displayed. Similarly, if I say Shift and if I just release the mouse, you see that it says Shift, and for Alter it will display the ALT. So while an event is fired, if you are willing to check whether any special key was pressed or not, you can write like this. You also have a choice in this. For example, I want to check whether Control and Alter, if both were pressed, then I want to have some code which is to be executed. You can join that as well. For example, I can say if event dot, let's say Alt key was pressed, and at the same time event dot, let's say Control key, CTRL key was also pressed, then I want to display a message that there are two keys pressed. I'll say Alter plus Control, something like this. I forgot the strings, right? So now let's try this also. Now I'm holding down both Alter and Control and executing mouse up. So it says A plus C. As long as the Control key is concerned, on the Mac machine, you have the command button, right, instead of Control. So for Mac machine, you also have the meta key. That is, you write like this. If you have an if condition, for example, then you write event dot meta key like this. So this is going to check the command button on Mac machine. So in that case, if you are dealing with the control keys for all the machines, your condition should be something like this. If event dot control key or event dot meta key, then you have some statements to execute. You can write like this. So event object has various properties like this. When the mouse events are executed, event object also gives you the coordinates, that is x and y coordinates. But that topic is for some other session. as we have client XY and page XY. So we are going to discuss the difference and then we'll try to implement it. So now let's discuss few relative questions to this topic. I mean, whatever we have discussed so far, we are going to get few questions out of this. The first question is, how will you disable right click on an element? So as we have discussed, on the on context menu, we just write return false. So that will disable the right click for that element. Do also remember that generally when you disable the right click, that means you do not want someone to copy the content. I mean the end user. As long as developers are concerned, they can open the view source and they can copy the source anyway. But at least you can disable the right click that way. So there is also one more event on copy that can also be returned, which disables the copy feature for the element. The second question is, how can you check whether a special key, that is Alt Shift or Control key, is pressed while an event is generated or not? So we have already seen that we can use event.ctrl key, Shift key, Alt key, meta key. These are the various properties we have with event object which can be used to check the special key status. The third question is, how do you check mouse button value while an event is generated? So it's about checking which mouse button is pressed. So we have the button property. So we wrote this code to check whether right, maybe left or middle button is pressed or not. So event.button can be used to check the mouse button value. And the fourth question is, for control key and CMD on Mac, how will you write the condition to check the key press? So this is the code which you can write, which checks CTRL, that is the control key, and meta key is for the CMD. So this code is helpful while writing the control or command button validation.